It happens in a fraction of a second. You are in a meeting, at dinner, or standing in some ordinary conversation that looked harmless a moment ago. Then it lands. Not always a direct insult. Sometimes it is a smile with contempt in it, a joke that hits too precisely, a tone that says, without saying it, that you are smaller than the space you are taking up. In that instant, your body reacts before your philosophy does. Your chest tightens, your jaw locks, heat rises into your face. Your mind offers you two miserable choices as if they are the only ones that exist. Strike back and enter their chaos, or stay silent, swallow the poison, and betray yourself in the name of peace. Most people live between those two extremes for years. Explosive reaction or quiet submission. They think power means having a sharper comeback, or they think maturity means enduring disrespect without visible resistance. But both responses trap them inside the frame the other person created. If you attack blindly, you step onto a battlefield they chose, on their terms, playing by their rules. If you freeze and say nothing out of fear, you teach them that your boundaries are negotiable and your dignity is cheap. The Stoics saw something harder and far more useful. Disrespect is not only language, it is an invitation. It is a test. It is an attempt to pull you into someone else's emotional structure and make your nervous system serve their need. That is where this story begins. Not with a sentence yet, not with a tactic, with a correction. The average person thinks disrespect is about what was said. Stoic wisdom sees something deeper. The real danger is not the remark. The real danger is the hidden agreement inside you that says, now I must react inside the frame they created. That is why so many people lose before they say a single word. The decision has already been made inside them. Their body feels the insult. Their mind confuses urgency with authority, and they start obeying a script that was never theirs. They explain, they defend, they counterattack, they laugh nervously. They replay the scene for hours. Different surface reactions, same surrender. If that sounds severe, it should. Many people call themselves calm when they are really suppressing. Many call themselves respectful when they are actually abandoning their own boundaries. Many call themselves strong because they can tolerate disrespect, when what they are really doing is training others to test them again. This is why the old advice almost never works. Ignore it sounds mature, but if the body has already interpreted the moment as a threat to dignity, simple dismissal rarely metabolizes it. The mind keeps returning because nothing was resolved. Open retaliation fails for the opposite reason. Now you are emotionally entangled. You are feeding the exact scene they wanted. Both options leave the other person in control of the architecture of the moment. The strange part is that disrespect does not only wound insecure people, it often unsettles highly competent people even more. That is because competence does not automatically free you from the need to be seen correctly. In fact, disciplined people are often deeply attached to fairness, order, and accurate perception. When someone misreads them, belittles them, or throws a low remark into a serious setting, what hurts is not only the insult itself. What hurts is the violent mismatch between who they know themselves to be and the distorted image suddenly being pushed onto them in public. The nervous system feels that mismatch and treats it like danger. This is why one sentence can keep burning all night. Not because the words were brilliant, but because they opened an old file. Old humiliations, old family dynamics, old fears about worth, visibility, and belonging. The disrespectful person may have hit one remark, but inside you an entire structure woke up. That is why two people can hear the same insult and respond in completely different ways. The event is external, the meaning is internal, and the internal meaning depends on what is still unresolved. So before you can use a weapon, you need architecture. Before the line, you need the frame. Before the response, you need the reframe. The disrespectful person is not automatically standing above you in judgment. In most cases, they are exposing something in themselves and hoping you are reactive enough to help them hide it. Once that lands, the geometry of the whole moment changes. You are no longer trapped between aggression and collapse. You are no longer trying to win the scene they designed. You are trying to refuse the invitation hidden inside it. That is the first shift, and without it, no sentence will save you. Once you see that, something subtle happens. You stop asking, "What is the perfect comeback?" and start asking, "What are they trying to make me become right now?" Angry, defensive, apologetic, eager to explain, eager to restore your image in their eyes. That question matters because the right response is not the one that sounds strongest. It is the one that refuses the role they wrote for you. The Stoics were not interested in theatrical victory. They were interested in sovereignty. Can you remain yourself inside pressure, or does someone else's disorder get to draft you into their script? This is why the line cannot come too early. If I gave it to you now without the foundation, you would say the right words with the wrong nervous system. You would still be pleading internally while trying to sound calm externally. The other person would feel that. Words are never just words. They carry the structure of the person speaking them. So the next step has to go deeper. Before you speak, you must understand what the insult actually is. And that is where the real cut begins. You are not facing a verdict. You are witnessing a confession disguised as power. To use the sentence correctly, you must misunderstand disrespect in a way most people never do. When someone speaks down to you, interrupts you with contempt, or hides hostility inside humor, your ego immediately interprets the moment as judgment. Your system says, "This is about me. They have measured my worth and delivered a verdict." That interpretation is automatic. It is also often false. Stoic wisdom forces a colder reading. The disrespectful person is rarely giving you a clean assessment of your value. More often, they are exposing the disorder of their own internal state. Their insecurity, their jealousy, their resentment, their need for hierarchy, their hunger to regulate themselves by lowering someone else. The insult functions less like truth and more like confession. That is not a soft reframe. It is psychological mechanics. Grounded people do not walk into ordinary moments, trying to inject humiliation into them. Internally stable people do not need passive aggression to feel larger. They do not need sarcasm to reclaim oxygen in the room. When someone does, something in them is already disordered. They may still look composed. They may still smile. They may still sound casual. But the act itself reveals instability. The person provoking you is not necessarily stronger. Often they are bleeding from some invisible wound and hoping you will help them hide it by reacting exactly as expected. This shift matters because once the insult stops looking like a verdict, it loses its sacred authority. You stop unconsciously placing them above you as judge. You stop treating their tone as a final statement about who you are. Instead, you begin to study the movement beneath the surface. Why this tactic? Why this tone? Why now? Why this audience? What do they gain if I become emotional, explanatory, louder, smaller, less stable? The moment you ask those questions, panic begins giving way to observation. That is the first true Stoic edge, not numbness. Observation before obedience. But this is where most people fall into the second trap. Even after they realize the insult says more about the other person than about them, they still want to repair their own image in the room. They still want to prove innocence, clarify intention, restore fairness, and make sure everyone sees what really happened. So they explain. That response looks mature compared with raw retaliation. It looks measured. It even feels noble. But over-explaining is often submission in better clothes. Think about what actually happens when you do it. Someone questions your competence, and you launch into your credentials. Someone twists your intentions, and you deliver a paragraph about your heart. Someone mocks your boundary, and you begin explaining why your decision makes sense. On the surface, you are defending yourself. Beneath the surface, you are accepting their authority. You are saying, "Your opinion has entered my nervous system, and I now need to reorganize myself so I can feel safe again." Manipulators love explanations for exactly that reason, not because they care about truth. Usually they do not. They care about destabilization. They care about watching you burn energy trying to correct something they never sincerely meant to understand. Marcus Aurelius understood a harsher principle. An emerald does not become precious because it argues with mud. The value does not rise because it is theatrically defended. That is the perception break many people need. Explanation is not always dignity. Often, it is emotional dependency, pretending to be clarity. If you are still trying to convince a disrespectful person that you deserve basic respect, you are already speaking from below your own dignity. This does not mean you never say anything. It means you must stop begging to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. There is a difference between stating a boundary and narrating yourself into exhaustion. One comes from structure. The other comes from fear of being miscast. And fear of being miscast is one of the deepest social addictions human beings carry. People cannot stand being seen as rude, selfish, weak, ignorant, dramatic, cold, or incompetent. So they over-explain to rescue identity in real time. But the room feels that instability. The disrespectful person feels it most of all. The more you explain, the more you reveal what shakes you, what you need acknowledged, how fast you move to restore your image. None of that strengthens your position. It exposes it. Now the mechanism is visible. The insult lands. The urge rises. You either attack, collapse, or explain. Attack feeds the theater. Collapse teaches negotiable boundaries. Explanation hands them the judge's gavel. The weapon you need must interrupt not only the insult, but the desperate movement after it. It must step outside the content of the remark and expose the structure beneath it. It must deny them theater, deny you over-explanation, and freeze the moment long enough for the hidden dynamic to become visible. That is why the line has to be short, not 5 sentences, not a speech, not a legal defense of your dignity. One sentence, one clean question that makes the mechanism visible without making you smaller in the act of asking it. And for that question to carry weight, one more thing has to be cut first. The need to be seen correctly by everyone in the room. Because that need is what keeps most people chained. They are not only hurt by disrespect, they are terrified by the witness of it, the audience. The possibility that one low remark, unanswered in the wrong way, will rearrange how others see them. But the room learns from your frame more than your volume. A clever comeback may entertain for 10 seconds. A governed response teaches something colder. You cannot be drafted into somebody else's pettiness on command. Once that lands, the fantasy of the perfect comeback starts losing its glamour. You realize you were never searching for better words. You were searching for a way to remain yourself without shrinking or burning under pressure. Now we arrive at the line itself. You do not glare. You do not rush. You do not smirk. You do not let your voice sharpen with wounded pride. You let the moment land. You hold the pause. You look at them without panic and without performance. Then, in a steady voice, you ask, "Are you hoping for a reaction from me?" That is the sentence. And it works because it does 3 things at once. First, it steps outside the content of the insult. You are no longer arguing about what they said. You are identifying what they are doing. That matters because manipulators, provocateurs, and passive-aggressive people rely on staying inside subtext. They want the exchange to remain deniable. They want to wound without being seen as wounding. They want your reaction to make them look innocent. The moment you calmly name the mechanism, you drag their hidden motive into light. Shadow tactics hate daylight. Second, the sentence reverses the direction of scrutiny. For a few seconds, you were supposed to be the object being examined. The insult was meant to place you on unstable ground. But this question flips the frame. Suddenly, they are the one whose behavior is being observed. not judged loudly, observed clearly. That is profoundly uncomfortable for people who operate through subtle provocation. They count on your emotional compliance. They do not expect clinical awareness. Third, the sentence protects your dignity without needing to prove it. You are not asking for respect. You are not pleading for fairness. You are not announcing a speech about boundaries. You are simply refusing to collaborate with the game. In one line, you show that you noticed the attempt, saw the hook, and declined to bite. That is why the question feels so cold. Not because it is cruel, because it removes the social oxygen their tactic needed. But the sentence is only half the weapon. The other half is silence. And this is where many people ruin the whole thing. They ask the question, then immediately soften it. I just mean, that sounded a little off. Or they laugh nervously. Or they explain why they asked it. Or they add moral language to make themselves sound reasonable. Every extra word weakens the architecture. Because the pressure is not in the sentence alone. The pressure is in your willingness to leave them alone with what the sentence exposed. After you ask it, stop. No explanation. No patching. No emotional translation. No helping them clean up the moment they created. Silence does something a comeback never can. It transfers the discomfort back to its source. Human beings hate empty tension, especially when they caused it. So what often happens next is revealing. They backtrack. They laugh too quickly. They call it a joke. They accuse you of being too sensitive. They over-explain their own behavior. All of that is data. All of it tells you more. The silence is not passive. It is diagnostic. This is why the sentence cannot be separated from nervous system discipline. If you say the right words while still pleading internally, the other person will feel it. They may not be able to describe it, but they will sense that you still need something from them. Approval, retreat, validation, recognition. The line only becomes dangerous when it is supported by a deeper standard. I no longer need your permission to remain myself. That is the philosophical core beneath the tactic. Insults hurt most where identity is still outsourced. If your worth is built on external agreement, any rude person can destabilize you. If your peace depends on being perceived accurately by everyone, disrespect becomes a kind of theft every time it appears. If your self-image is fragile, one cheap remark can echo for hours, because some part of you still fears it might have touched truth. Tactical lines alone cannot repair that. The sentence can protect the moment. It cannot replace the inner citadel you have not built. So what builds it? Kept promises to yourself, private integrity, a life you can stand inside without applause, clear standards, repeated evidence that you are who you say you are when nobody is watching. When that structure grows, the sentence changes tone automatically. It no longer sounds like a clever trick. It sounds like a boundary spoken by someone who no longer needs strangers to negotiate their value. This is also why the line should never be used theatrically. If you are secretly trying to humiliate them, prove your superiority, or enjoy the room's approval, you have already stepped back into the same dirty economy. Stoicism is not about winning the room. It is about keeping your center off the market. The goal is not to sound devastating. The goal is to refuse the bait without making yourself smaller in the process. And this is the deeper freedom hidden inside the question. It shifts you from reaction to awareness, from proving to observing, from defending your image to protecting your structure. Most people think they need a perfect sentence because they believe words create power. In reality, words only reveal power that has already been built. The line matters because it makes the hidden frame visible, but the frame behind your voice matters more than the words themselves. That brings the story to the next law. The moment does not end when the conversation moves on. If someone has shown you how they are willing to treat you, the real question is no longer how to survive that exchange. It is what access they deserve afterward. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make is treating a good response like a complete solution. It is not. You can ask the right question, hold the silence, and still go back to giving warmth, speed, humor, and personal depth to someone who has already shown contempt for your boundaries. That is not wisdom, it is structural confusion, and confusion is where self-respect leaks. Most people think the conflict ends after the exchange. The Stoic sees the opposite. The exchange only reveals what the relationship, the room, or the pattern actually is. Um, 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 um. That matters because many people handle one moment well and then ruin the entire lesson by returning to the same emotional economy afterward. They ask the sentence, they hold the silence, they get through the scene, then they go right back to offering warmth, speed, humor, attention, personal stories, and intimate access to someone who has already shown a willingness to disrespect them. That is not forgiveness. It is structural confusion. Once someone has shown you how they are willing to treat you, the deeper question becomes, what clearance level do they now deserve in my life? This is where Stoic wisdom becomes strategic. You do not need revenge. You do not need a dramatic exit speech. You do not need to punish them theatrically. But you do need to stop offering premium access to people who keep trying to pull cheap reactions out of you. That is the law of withdrawal. Not childish silence, not sulking, not performative coldness, measured reduction of access. You answer more briefly. You stop volunteering interior detail. You become polite, factual, and harder to enter. You stop being emotionally generous where basic respect is unstable. You stop giving your best energy to people who treat that energy like public property. And you do not narrate every step of this change, because speeches are often just one more attempt to be understood by the wrong audience. This is one of the hardest parts for good people. They want fairness to be mutual. They want respectful boundary conversations to repair everything. Sometimes that works. But many times, the disrespectful person does not need more explanation. They need less access. There is a difference between someone making one clumsy mistake and someone repeatedly testing your edge. Wisdom includes knowing which one you are facing. Not every conflict deserves distance, but every repeated pattern that feeds on your over-availability eventually does. This is where the paradox gets painful. When you stop over-explaining, stop reacting, and begin withdrawing access, many people will not suddenly respect you beautifully. Some will resent you. Some will mock the change. Some will call you cold, arrogant, too sensitive, dramatic, or changed. Why? Because your old pattern made them comfortable. It gave them open access to your nervous system. Your new pattern removes that convenience. People often call boundaries pride when what they really mean is, I can no longer use you as easily. That line divides people because it exposes something ugly in human nature. Some relationships survive largely because one person keeps absorbing more disrespect, more confusion, more emotional labor, more explanation, and more access than a healthy structure would ever require. The moment that person stops, the relationship changes, but the truth is harsher. The relationship was already distorted. The boundary simply made the distortion visible. This is where many people fold. They can survive an insult more easily than they can survive being misunderstood after they stop allowing it. So they go back to smoothing things over, back to proving they are kind, back to over-explaining, back to donating warmth to people who treat that warmth as entitlement. Why? Because they still want universal innocence. They want boundaries and approval at the same time, distance and praise at the same time. Self-respect, without ever being recast as selfish, harsh, different, difficult, or cold. Stoicism offers no such fantasy. If you stop participating in toxic dynamics, some people will rewrite you, so they do not have to rewrite themselves. Let them. That is not bitterness. It is liberation from public relations. Your life is not a campaign to remain likable inside every confused person's account of events. Once that lands, the whole subject becomes heavier. The sentence was never merely for that one moment. It was the visible edge of a larger structure, a structure that says, I do not argue for my dignity. I do not rescue people from the discomfort of their own behavior. I do not keep giving intimate access where respect has become optional. This is where you stop becoming merely hard to provoke and start becoming hard to waste. Some people can avoid conflict and still waste themselves everywhere else. They stay endlessly available. They keep their attention open to people who drain them. They let disrespectful dynamics live on in quieter forms because there was no explosion. Stoic withdrawal corrects that. It says the price of your presence is not apology, not performance, not occasional politeness. The price is stable, respect. Without that, the access changes. The deeper effect is internal. Every time you reduce access after disrespect, you teach your nervous system something new. Boundaries are not speeches. They are distributions of energy. Self-respect is not a mood. It is a pattern. Peace is not maintained by keeping everyone comfortable. It is maintained by refusing to keep old distortions alive with fresh emotional labor. Distance reveals truth quickly. It shows who respected you and who merely enjoyed your overextension. It shows who valued your presence and who only valued your availability. It shows who can handle your boundaries and who depended on your softness more than your substance. In that sense, withdrawal is not punishment, it is revelation. Once you understand that, the final layer becomes visible. The point was never just to survive disrespect. The point was to stop organizing your life around the people, rooms, and patterns that keep requiring the same lesson from you. And this is why long-term dignity feels quieter than revenge. Revenge keeps you tied to the person. Withdrawal restores ownership of time, attention, and structure. It stops the leak without spectacle. The immature think distance is weakness because it is not dramatic. The disciplined know better. When your energy stops feeding what disrespects you, the balance of the relationship changes. At once. Now the title can finally become heavier than it sounded at the beginning. Say this one sentence when someone disrespects you. Don't stay silent. The sentence is simple. Are you hoping for a reaction from me? But the power of it was never in the wording alone. The power was always in what the words represent. A refusal to enter their frame, a refusal to explain yourself into exhaustion, a refusal to rescue them from the discomfort of their own tactic, a refusal to keep giving access where respect is unstable, a refusal to base your dignity on whether the room gets your side of the story. That is why the payoff of this story is not really a line, it is a standard that says disrespect is not automatically a command to fight. It is not automatically a command to endure quietly, either. It is a test of whether you will abandon your center to manage someone else's chaos. The Stoic answer is no. Not with rage, not with collapse, with awareness. And that awareness changes everything. The next time someone drops a condescending joke, a passive-aggressive remark, a smug tone, or a subtle attempt to put you beneath them, you will still feel your body react. The chest may tighten. Heat may rise. Stoicism does not promise the death of emotion. It promises government over emotion. The change is what happens next. You no longer mistake urgency for authority. You no longer assume the insult is a verdict. You no longer sprint into explanation because your image feels touched. You pause. You observe. You see the invitation for what it is. Then you ask the question that exposes the game without joining it. Are you hoping for a reaction from me? And then you hold the silence. In that moment, silence becomes ownership. It keeps the discomfort where it belongs. It prevents your nervous system from donating itself to their tactic. It shows, without theatrics, that you notice the move and declined the bait. Most people think power is loud because they have spent their lives watching ego perform itself in public. Stoic power is different. It is narrower, cleaner, and colder. It sees the mechanism, names it once, and withholds all unnecessary fuel. But the deeper freedom arrives after the moment. You stop measuring success by whether they apologized. You stop measuring power by whether the room clapped. You stop measuring self-respect by whether everyone now understands your heart correctly. You stop being available for cheap access. You stop trying to be the hero in every twisted retelling. You stop chasing a universal innocence that can only be purchased through self-betrayal. That is when Stoic wisdom stops being content and becomes structure. Real peace does not come from finally saying the perfect sentence one time. It comes from becoming the kind of person who no longer needs disrespectful people to see them accurately in order to remain intact. That sentence should sting because it exposes the hidden dependency beneath so many reactions. A lot of people are not shattered by disrespect itself. They are shattered by the possibility that the disrespect revealed how much of their dignity still depends on external perception. Once you see that, the whole subject changes. Some insults do not survive your explanation. They survive your belief that explanation is still required. Some people do not keep disrespecting you because they are powerful. They keep doing it because your old pattern taught them there would always be emotional access, always a reaction, always extra language, always one more chance to enter your head. That pattern ends when the structure changes. And when the structure changes, something unexpected happens. You become harder to waste. Not because fewer people, fewer rooms, and fewer manipulative moments get automatic access to your identity, attention, and peace. The disrespect was never the center. Your reaction was never the only issue. The sentence was never the whole weapon. The deeper question was always this: can someone else's disorder force you out of your own structure? If the answer is yes, the sentence becomes performance. If the answer is no, the sentence becomes revelation. That is the final convergence. They may still call you arrogant, cold, too sensitive, difficult, or changed. Let them. They may need that version of events to avoid seeing themselves clearly. Let them. Your life is not a campaign to remain likable inside every confused person's narrative. The cost of that campaign is too high. It demands explanation without end, softness without reciprocity, and access without respect. Stoicism refuses the bargain. So the next time the room changes, remember what has already been built. The body reacts. Fine. You are not required to obey it. The invitation appears. Fine. See it clearly. Then refuse it with precision. Ask the question. Hold the silence. Change the access. Keep your dignity off the market. That is what mature self-respect looks like. Not dramatic revenge. Not fake indifference. Not spiritual language hiding social fear. Real self-respect is accurate allocation. Who gets access? Who gets explanation? Who gets warmth? Who gets distance? These decisions shape your peace far more than speeches ever will. That is why the Stoics were so dangerous. They understood that no one can fully disrespect you without some form of inner consent. Not because other people become harmless, but because their attempt only becomes powerful when it gains access to your internal throne. Once you remove that access, the insult loses its old magic. It can still exist, it just can no longer rule. So say the sentence, hold the silence, change the structure afterward, keep building worth privately, keep your promises, guard your inner citadel. Let your life become the evidence that your dignity was never available for public negotiation. Then let them go home and build whatever version of you helps them sleep. You do not belong in their story anymore.